Hey, what's up, guys, to a solo episode of Decon's Conspiracies. So, today I'm going to talk about Rasputin. So, the Russian royal family at the turn of the 20th century was completely dominated by the charismatic power of a defrocked monk turned psychic healer and fortune teller, Grigori Yefimovich, known as Rasputin. The former holy man possessed the power to maintain the health of the Tsar's son, Alexei, who was dangerously anemic. The hold this gave him over the Russian royal family is well documented, and Rasputin used his influence for his great personal gain. The Mad Monk greatly destabilized the Russian imperial government, and it's actually not just like a lot of people are like, well, did this really happen? Well, yeah, this was actually documented, very well documented. You had people from all over that region and that era writing about what Rasputin was doing with the royal family. So, and this is why, they were looking into like changing the type of government they had in Russia. Like, should it be a monarchy or should we move more towards, the more modern, you know, like we'll have a governing body and all those kind of things. So people begin to kind of realize, like, ooh, this could be really dangerous if we keep a monarchy and a person's able to influence them. Anyways, so he greatly destabilized the Russian imperial government, and he used this influence to put his followers in positions of power and authority. He demanded huge like bribes in return for um, persuading the Tsarina Alexandra, the Empress, to favor certain couriers, business people, or plans of action, and charge great sums for dispensing his, and I'm using quotations here, sorry guys, I'm a little sick too, his healings amongst the lesser nobility. He was already a national scandal by 1911, and by 1915 had become the Tsarina's chief advisor. Sorry. He also had a voracious sexual appetite and would frequently demand sexual intercourse from both men and women as part of the payment for his services, often insisting that he slept with the teenage child of a supplicant, if such were available, if they had them. He also had no end of groupies available because it had a lot to do with his power and because of his spiritual 13-inch erection. His exploit outraged the general public, but the royal family was totally under his spell. Reports from the time suggest that his power of healing and precognition was both entirely genuine. Letters from Alexandra to Rasputin also hint that he was having an affair with her. Finally, a cabal of Russian nobles decided that Rasputin's influence was corrupting the state, and he had to die. Led by Prince Felix Yusupov, the cabal lured the healer to a private party hosted by Yusupov, where he was murdered on December 30th, 1960. It was too late to save the reputation of the royal family, and shortly afterwards, the revolution swept away the old order. So the strange part of Rasputin's death certainly lends credence to his healing powers. Arriving at the party, the holy man was placed in front of a banquet laced with enough cyanide to kill a dozen normal men. One conspirator, a medical doctor named Lazovert, prepared the poisoned food. Rasputin became suspicious that Yusupov was not eating. When the monk failed to show any ill effects from his feast, the prince panicked and shot him at close range. He was also shot by the Grand Duke Pavlovich, the Tsar's nephew. Enraged, but still seemingly mobile, Rasputin chased Yusupov out of the house and into the courtyard, where a gang of conspirators beat him to a bloody pulp with hefty iron chains. Dr. Lazovert examined the monk and declared him to be alive, so they wrapped him in the chains and dumped him in a hole cut in the ice of the river Neva. So, yeah, it's like, oh, wow, that's one hell of an assassination, right? So let's look at the usual suspect. The spiritual avatar. Perhaps the most common theory is that Rasputin genuinely did possess the healing and precognitive powers that history has granted him, including the ability to mesmerize women. He used these powers to gain his position of authority, and it was this that led him to being murdered. The power were derived from the fact that Rasputin was in fact a spiritual avatar or a genuine saint. That's one suspect. Okay, now Saint Germain. Rasputin, in fact, the immortal known to medieval Europe as the Count of the Saint Germain, smoothing the way for the Russian Revolution so that the history could follow in its proper course. When he found himself stuck in the water and unable to tunnel out, Rasputin decided the best course of action was to feign his death and lie low. He was dug out of the Neva by the conspirators and hastily buried. From a shallow grave, he found it relatively easy to tunnel out. His enemies were certain he was dead, and so he was set free to make his escape. Rumors suggest that Saint Germain may now live in Los Angeles, having spent the 1980s in Eastern Europe bringing communism to an end. Alright, now let's get to the fun part. The unusual suspects. Rasputin's unnatural vitality was not a result of psychic ability at all. The healer was actually an alien, a rogue member of a small exploration team who decided to indulge himself in a few years of orgiastic amusement. Because his sociology was different to ours, the assassination was almost ineffective. In the end, it was a lack of exposure to direct sunlight that killed him, not the low temperatures of lack of oxygen. So let's look at the most convincing evidence. Rasputin's frozen corpse was finally retrieved several miles down the river where it had been dumped. He had shaken loose of his chains and had been trying to claw his way out of the ice from the inside when he finally succumbed, after having been totally submerged in freezing water for at least 6 hours. So, yeah, it's kind of creepy, huh? So the most mysterious fact is that perhaps the oddest feat that Rasputin's survival and his capacity to consume such a huge dose of cyanide. Equally as strange, though, it is an artifact that surfaced in Paris in the 1960s, Rasputin's mummified penis. One observer described it as like a blackened banana, about a foot long. There is no record of any conspirators castrating the victim, however, so we don't know if this is real. So, now, here comes my skepticism. So, skeptically speaking, it is just about possible that the poison was old and ineffective, that the gunshot failed to hit any vital organs, that the beating was mostly surface damage, and even that the cold of the river Neva slowed his tissue damage from oxygen starvation so much that Rasputin was able to revive for long enough to lock his fingers in the ice. But it was so precognitive, when did he not foretell the danger of taking Yusupov up on his invitation? So there we go. It is creepy though, like if you look at the details of the assassination, he was shot, stabbed, beaten. He was shot in the face, by the way. And even when they found his body down the river, when they pulled him out, he'd been frozen, in the ice for up to 6 hours. They realized that he had died from drowning. He had water in his lungs. So, there you go. Anyways, that's it. It was a short episode. Short little Deacon's Conspiracies. So, there we go, guys. Like and subscribe and do whatever.